Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the ESS Defiant and watched the stars ahead grow brighter. The ship had been traveling for 6 months now, pushing deeper into space than any human had ever gone before. Jake was 35 years old and had dreamed of this moment since he was a child. He was the commander of humanity's first real deep space mission, and every day brought new discoveries. The crew of 200 people worked around the clock to keep the massive ship running. They had food for 3 years, fuel for 5, and hope for much longer than that. Earth seemed very far away now, just another dot of light in the darkness behind them. Jake often wondered what his wife Susan was doing back home, whether their daughter Katie still remembered his face. Dr. Lisa Blake called out from her station near the back of the bridge. She was the ship's science officer, a woman who knew more about space than anyone Jake had ever met. Her dark hair was always pulled back in a tight bun, and her green eyes never missed anything important. She had been studying strange readings for the past 3 days, and Jake could tell she was getting excited about something. "Commander, you need to see this," Lisa said, her voice tight with barely controlled excitement. She pointed at her computer screen, where lines of data scrolled past in green letters. "These energy patterns are not natural. Something out there is making them, and it's big." Jake walked over to look at the screen. The numbers meant nothing to him, but he trusted Lisa completely. She had found 3 new planets during their journey, and discovered that one of them had water. If she said something was important, it probably was. "How big are we talking about?" Jake asked. "Bigger than Earth," Lisa replied. "Maybe bigger than our entire solar system. The energy signature is unlike anything we've ever seen. It's organized, patterned, almost like what? Like a signal, like someone is trying to communicate." The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's engines. Every person there understood what Lisa was suggesting. For 300 years, humans had wondered if they were alone in the universe. They had built radio telescopes, sent messages into space, and searched the stars for any sign of other intelligent life. They had found nothing but silence. Captain Steve Carter stood up from his chair. He was older than Jake, maybe 50, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. Steve had been in the space service for 20 years and had never believed they would find anything out here except rocks and gas. Now his hands were shaking slightly as he stared at Lisa's computer screen. "Are you certain about this, Dr. Blake?" Steve asked. "As certain as I can be without more data," Lisa replied. "But Commander, there's something else. The signal is getting stronger. Whatever is making it, we're getting closer to it." Jake felt his heart beating faster. This was the moment every human had dreamed about. First contact with another intelligent species. The thought was exciting and terrifying at the same time. What would these aliens be like? Would they be friendly? Would they even be able to understand each other? "How long until we reach the source?" Jake asked. "At our current speed, maybe 2 days," Lisa said. Steve Carter made the decision that would change everything. He could have ordered the ship to turn around and head back to Earth. He could have waited and called for backup. Instead, he looked at Jake and nodded. "We go forward," Steve said. "This is what we came out here to find." The next 2 days passed slowly. The crew worked harder than ever, checking every system twice and preparing for whatever they might encounter. The ship's communications officer, a young man named Ben Rogers, spent hours trying to decode the alien signal. He was 28 years old and had the best ears on the ship. If anyone could figure out what the aliens were saying, it would be Ben. Dr. Lisa Blake barely slept during those 2 days. She ran test after test, trying to learn everything she could about the signal before they reached its source. The energy patterns were complex beyond anything humans had created, but there was something almost familiar about them too, like a song heard long ago and half remembered. When they finally arrived, nobody was prepared for what they saw. The alien structure was enormous, easily the size of Earth's moon. It hung in space like a silver flower with thousands of thin arms reaching out in all directions. Lights moved along its surface in patterns that seemed almost alive, and the entire thing pulsed with a soft blue glow that was beautiful and strange. "My God," Steve Carter whispered. Ben Rogers suddenly straightened up at his station. "Commander, I'm getting something. The signal has changed. It's responding to us. What do you mean responding? Jake asked. It knows we're here. The patterns are different now, more complex. I think it's trying to talk to us. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. These were good people, brave people, but they were all scared. They had found what humanity had been searching for, and none of them knew what to do next. The alien structure was so large and advanced that their ship looked like a tiny bug floating next to a mountain. Open a channel, Steve Carter ordered. Sir, we don't know their language, Ben replied. Then we start with what we do know. Mathematics is universal. Ben nodded and began transmitting a simple sequence of prime numbers, followed by basic information about Earth and its location. The message was simple but clear. We are here, we are intelligent, and we come in peace. The response came immediately. Suddenly, every screen on the bridge lit up with incoming signals. Not one voice answered them, but hundreds, then thousands. The communications array was flooded with transmissions from all directions, as if the entire galaxy had suddenly woken up and started talking at once. Commander, Ben said, his voice barely a whisper. I don't think we're talking to just one alien species. I think we're talking to all of them. Jake Morrison realized that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and judging by the overwhelming response to their simple message, they had just announced their presence to a galaxy that had been watching and waiting for them to finally speak. 3 months after the ESS Defiant made first contact, the skies above Earth filled with ships that looked like nothing humans had ever built. They came in all shapes and sizes, some long and thin like needles, others round like bubbles, and a few that seemed to change shape as they moved through space. The largest ship was the size of a small city, and moved with grace that defied everything humans knew about physics. Ambassador Helen Davis stood in the newly built meeting hall in Geneva, watching through the large windows as the alien ships settled into orbit around Earth. She was 42 years old and had spent her entire career dealing with difficult diplomatic situations. She had negotiated peace treaties between warring nations and helped solve conflicts that seemed impossible. Nothing in her experience had prepared her for this moment. The lead ship landed in a field outside the city with barely a sound. Its hull was smooth and silver, and it seemed to flow like liquid metal as it touched the ground. When the door opened, the being that emerged was tall and graceful, with long limbs and skin that shimmered with its own inner light. It moved like it was dancing through air instead of walking on solid ground. Helen had read all the reports from the Defiant's crew, but seeing an alien in person was still shocking. The being introduced itself as HFY, speaking perfect English in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. How it had learned their language so quickly was just the first of many questions Helen hoped to get answered. We represent the Galactic Council, HFY explained as they walked into the meeting hall together. 47 species from across this galaxy, all united under one government for the past 12,000 years. Helen tried to hide her amazement. 12,000 years of galactic civilization, and humanity had only just learned to fly a few centuries ago. She wondered how far behind they really were and whether they could ever catch up. The meeting hall had been built specifically for this moment, with chairs and tables that could accommodate beings of different sizes and shapes. As Helen took her seat, she noticed that several of the alien delegates were already present. Some looked almost human, while others were so strange that her mind had trouble processing their appearance. One alien looked like a giant insect with 6 arms and compound eyes that reflected rainbow colors. Another seemed to be made entirely of crystal, its body catching and bending the light in beautiful patterns. A third was covered in thick fur and had a face that reminded Helen of a wolf, but with intelligence burning in its dark eyes. HFY began the formal presentation with words that sent chills down Helen's spine. Humanity is an anomaly, the alien said calmly. In all our years of studying galactic evolution, we have never encountered a species quite like yours. Helen leaned forward. What do you mean by anomaly? Every other species in this galaxy developed along predictable paths, HFY explained. They grew slowly, carefully with natural limits that prevented them from becoming dangerous to themselves or others. Your species is different. You adapt at a rate that should be impossible. Teti, Crystal being spoke next, its voice sounding like breaking glass. Your people have gone from discovering fire to traveling between stars in just 10,000 years. Most species take 100,000 years to achieve the same progress. Helen felt a mix of pride and worry. Humans had always been quick to learn and adapt, but apparently that was not normal in the galaxy. She began to understand why the aliens had come to Earth instead of simply sending a message back to the Defiant. We have been watching your world for some time, HFY continued. Your wars, your technology, your rapid expansion into space. You concern us. In what way? Helen asked, though she was beginning to fear the answer. The wolf-like alien growled, softly before speaking. You fight constantly, even against your own kind. You create weapons capable of destroying your entire world, then build even more powerful ones. You take risks that would terrify other species. Helen wanted to argue, to defend humanity's actions, but she knew there was truth in what the alien was saying. Humans did fight a lot, and they had indeed built weapons that could end all life on Earth. From an outside perspective, they probably did seem dangerous and unpredictable. However, HFY said, we are not here to judge you. We are here to help you find your place in the galactic community. What kind of place? Helen asked. The answer came like a physical blow. A controlled place, HFY replied. Every species in the galaxy accepts certain technological restrictions and submits to council oversight. This prevents conflicts and ensures peace. You will do the same. Helen felt her diplomatic training take over, keeping her voice calm even as her mind raced. And if we refuse? Then you will be contained, the crystal being said simply. Your species will be prevented from leaving this solar system until you agree to accept our guidance. The insect-like alien clicked its mandibles together before speaking. This is not a threat, Ambassador Davis. This is simply how we maintain order. We have dealt with aggressive species before. What happened to them? Helen asked. The silence that followed was more frightening than any words could have been. HFY finally answered. They learned to accept their limitations, or they were prevented from spreading their aggression to other worlds. The galaxy is a peaceful place now, because we make difficult decisions when necessary. Helen understood the message clearly. Submit, or be destroyed. It was the same ultimatum that powerful nations had given to weaker ones throughout human history, except now humanity was the weak one facing beings with technology beyond their imagination. How much time do we have to consider your offer? Helen asked. 1 year, HFY replied. That should be sufficient for your leaders to understand the situation and make the correct choice. The meeting continued for several more hours, with the aliens explaining the rules that governed galactic civilization. No species was allowed to develop certain types of weapons. No species was permitted to expand beyond a predetermined number of star systems. All conflicts had to be approved and supervised by the Council. Every aspect of a species' development was monitored and controlled. As Helen listened, she realized that the aliens were offering humanity a cage. It might be a comfortable cage, with access to advanced technology and knowledge from across the galaxy, but it was still a cage. Humans would never again be free to make their own choices about their future. When the meeting finally ended, Helen walked back to her hotel room with her mind spinning. She had to contact Earth's leaders immediately. President Robert Hayes would need to call an emergency session of the United Earth Assembly. Every nation would have to work together to decide humanity's response. But as Helen looked up at the alien ships filling the night sky, she already knew what that response would be. Humans had never been good at accepting limitations, especially when those limitations came from outsiders. They had fought for their freedom against empires and dictators throughout their history. The aliens had made one crucial mistake in their calculations about humanity. They assumed that the same qualities that made humans dangerous would also make them easy to control. They thought fear of extinction would force humans to submit. They had never encountered a species that would rather fight impossible odds than live on their knees. Helen picked up her phone and began making the calls that would determine whether humanity would bow to galactic authority or stand alone against the combined might of 47 alien civilizations. Either way, the decision would reshape the future of the entire galaxy. President Robert Hayes stood before the United Earth Assembly and looked out at representatives from every nation on the planet. The Great Hall in New York had never hosted a more important meeting. Outside, crowds had gathered in the streets, waiting to learn what humanity's answer would be to the alien ultimatum. The whole world held its breath. Robert was 60 years old and had led Earth through 3 major crises during his time in office. He had negotiated the Climate Recovery Accords, ended the water wars, and helped establish the first permanent colonies on Mars. None of those challenges compared to what they faced now. "We have 1 year to decide our future," Robert told the Assembly. "The Galactic Council wants us to accept limitations on our technology, our expansion, and our freedom. They claim this is for our own good and the good of the galaxy." A voice called out from the crowd of representatives. "What choice do we have? They have 47 species and technology we can't match." General Patricia Stone stood up from her seat in the front row. She was a tall woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. At 55, she was the head of Earth's military forces and had spent her entire career preparing for threats that might come from space. "We always have a choice," Patricia said firmly. "The question is whether we choose to live free or die free. Personally, I prefer both." Murmurs rippled through the Assembly. Some representatives looked frightened by Patricia's words, while others nodded in agreement. The debate that followed would rage for days, but Robert already knew where he stood. Dr. Alex Chen raised his hand to speak. He was the director of Earth's Advanced Research Division, a quiet man in his 40s who rarely appeared in public. When he did speak, everyone listened, because Alex was responsible for most of humanity's recent technological breakthroughs. "Before we make any decisions," Alex said calmly, "there are things you need to know about our situation. Things that might change your perspective on whether we can resist the Council's demands." Robert gestured for Alex to continue. The scientist walked to the front of the room and activated a holographic display that showed images of alien technology captured by the Defiance sensors. "For the past 3 months," Alex began, "my teams have been studying everything we learned from our first contact with the aliens. Their ships, their energy sources, their communication methods. What we discovered is remarkable." The hologram showed detailed scans of alien ship components with human annotations marking various systems and functions. "The aliens are incredibly advanced, but they're also incredibly specialized," Alex continued. "Each species seems to have perfected 1 or 2 types of technology while ignoring others. It's like they've been stuck in the same patterns for thousands of years." Representative Maria Santos from Brazil stood up. "What does that mean for us?" "It means they think in straight lines," Alex replied. "They assume that all species develop technology the same way they did, slowly and carefully, 1 step at a time. They've never encountered a species like us." "How are we different?" asked Representative Kim Park from Korea. Alex smiled for the first time since the presentation began. "We're generalists. We don't perfect one technology and then stop. We take a little bit from here, a little bit from there, and we combine them in ways no one else has thought of." The hologram changed to show human ships under construction in the orbital shipyards around Earth. But these weren't the same designs that had been used to build the Defiant. These ships were sleeker, faster, and incorporated technology that looked alien but somehow familiar. "You've been reverse engineering their technology," General Stone said with approval. "Not just reverse engineering," Alex replied. "We've been improving it. Human engineers have been working around the clock to understand how alien systems work, then finding ways to make them work better." The Assembly erupted in excited conversations. If humanity could match alien technology, maybe they had a chance after all. But Robert raised his hand for silence. "Even if we can match their technology," Robert said, "we're still vastly outnumbered. 47 species against 1 doesn't sound like good odds." Patricia Stone stepped forward again. "Numbers aren't everything, Mr. President. The aliens have been at peace for 12,000 years. They've forgotten how to fight real wars. We haven't. You're talking about fighting the entire galaxy, Representative Chen from China pointed out. I'm talking about fighting for our freedom, Patricia replied. Something humans have always been willing to do, no matter the odds. Dr. Alex Chen activated another holographic display, this one showing star charts with human colonies marked in blue and alien territories marked in red. There's something else to consider. The aliens expect us to be afraid. They expect us to submit, because that's what every other species has done when faced with their power. Maybe those other species were smart, said Representative Williams from England. Or maybe they were just tired, Alex replied. The aliens told us they've been maintaining galactic peace for 12,000 years. Do you know what that really means? It means nobody in the galaxy has fought a real war for 12,000 years. They've forgotten what conflict looks like. Robert understood where Alex was going with this. You're saying they're not prepared for a species that fights back. I'm saying they're not prepared for us, Alex confirmed. Every military simulation we've run shows the same thing. The aliens have superior individual technology, but they have no experience with actual warfare. Their entire military doctrine is based on intimidation, not combat. General Stone nodded grimly. It makes sense. Why learn to fight when you can just threaten to destroy anyone who opposes you? They've been bullying species into submission for so long that they've forgotten how to deal with someone who refuses to be bullied. The debate continued for hours, with representatives arguing for and against resistance. Some believed that humanity should accept alien guidance, arguing that it would give them access to advanced technology and keep them safe from destruction. Others insisted that freedom was worth any price, even extinction. Finally, Representative Jackson from the United States asked the question that was on everyone's mind. What if we're wrong? What if we fight back and they destroy us all? Robert Hayes looked out at the assembly, thinking of his own children and grandchildren. The decision he made today would determine what kind of world they inherited. Then we die as humans, Robert said quietly. Free humans. The final vote wasn't even close. 347 representatives voted to reject the alien ultimatum. Only 23 voted for submission. Humanity had chosen its path. As news of the vote spread across Earth, something remarkable happened. Instead of panic, there was celebration. People poured into the streets not to riot or flee, but to show their support for the decision. From New York to Tokyo to Lagos, crowds gathered and chanted the same words over and over. We are human, and we bow to no one. In the orbital shipyards above Earth, construction crews worked faster than ever before. The new ships taking shape were unlike anything humans had built before, incorporating alien technology in ways the original designers had never imagined. They were beautiful and deadly, a perfect reflection of the species that had created them. 3. Months later, when the Galactic Council's enforcement fleet arrived to implement containment protocols, they found Earth's solar system defended by ships that shouldn't have existed, crewed by a species that shouldn't have been able to adapt so quickly. The aliens had made their calculations based on 12,000 years of experience with predictable species. They had never faced humans before, and that was going to make all the difference. Admiral Karen Brooks stood on the bridge of the ESS Unity and watched the alien fleet approach through the darkness of space. 300 ships filled her tactical display, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. They moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with energy shields that could deflect anything humans had previously been able to throw at them. Karen was 48 years old and had spent her entire military career preparing for threats that came from other humans. She had commanded ships in the Arctic conflict and led the defense of the Mars colonies during the Independence War. Nothing in her experience had prepared her for this moment, but she was ready anyway. Enemy fleet is maintaining standard approach. Vector, reported Lieutenant Commander Sam Taylor from his position at the tactical station. He was 32 and had been one of the first officers trained to operate the new hybrid technology ships. His hands moved across controls that looked half human and half alien, managing systems that most people couldn't even understand. How many ships do we have ready? Karen asked. 47 operational, Admiral. replied Commander Lisa Park from the communications station. All captains report ready for combat. Karen almost smiled at the irony. 47 human ships against 300 alien vessels. The numbers should have been impossible, but Karen had seen the test results from the new ships. Human engineers had taken alien technology and made it better, faster, more flexible. More importantly, they had put human crews aboard those ships, and humans fought differently than anyone else in the galaxy. The lead alien ship opened a communication channel, and HFY's familiar voice filled the bridge. Admiral Brooks, you are ordered to stand down immediately. Your species has refused to accept Council guidance and containment protocols are now in effect. Surrender your ships and return to Earth. Karen picked up the communication device and spoke calmly. This is Admiral Karen Brooks of the United Earth Defense Fleet. You are entering human space without permission. Turn around and leave, or we will defend ourselves. There was a long pause before HFY replied. Admiral, you have 47 ships, we have 300. This is not a battle you can win. Then you don't understand humans very well, Karen replied and cut the connection. Captain Danny Wright's voice came through on the fleet communication channel from his ship, the ESS Horizon. Admiral, enemy ships are charging weapons. They're really going to do this. All ships, this is Admiral Brooks, Karen announced to her fleet. Remember your training. Fight smart, fight together, and show them what humans can do when they're pushed too far. The Battle of Sol began at 1432, Earth Standard Time on a Tuesday afternoon. The alien ships opened fire first, sending beams of energy that should have cut through human shields like paper. Instead, the human ships danced through space with impossible grace, their hybrid engines allowing them to move in ways that violated everything the aliens knew about physics. The ESS Liberty, commanded by Captain Jennifer Walsh, spun through, a complete rotation while firing all weapons, her shots hitting 3 alien ships before they could adjust their aim. The ESS Freedom under Captain Mike Rodriguez used its alien-derived cloaking system to disappear completely, then reappeared behind enemy lines to strike at their formation's weak points. But it was the human tactics that truly shocked the alien fleet. While alien ships fought in rigid formations, following battle plans that had been developed over thousands of years, human ships moved like a pack of wolves, each captain making independent decisions while working together toward a common goal. Admiral Karen Brooks had studied every piece of information available about alien military doctrine. They fought like chess players, moving their pieces according to established patterns and responding to enemy actions with predetermined countermoves. Humans fought like humans, chaotic and unpredictable, adapting to changing situations in real time. Enemy flagship is trying to retreat, reported Lieutenant Commander Taylor. They're pulling back to regroup. Let them go, Karen ordered. Focus on the ships that are still fighting. The battle raged for 6 hours. Human ships darted between alien formations, striking hard and fast before disappearing again. The new hybrid weapons, combining human creativity with alien power sources, proved devastatingly effective against shields that had been designed to stop conventional energy beams. But the moment that changed everything happened when the alien flagship's reactor began to overload. Captain Danny Wright was closest to the massive ship when his sensors detected the critical failure. The flagship contained over 10,000 alien crew members, and when its reactor went critical, they would all die in the explosion. Any other species in the galaxy would have watched the enemy ship destroy itself and celebrated the victory. Danny Wright did something that no alien strategist had ever predicted. All ships, this is the Horizon, Danny announced on the fleet channel. I'm moving to assist the alien flagship. Their reactor is going critical. Captain Wright, belay that. Order, Admiral Brooks replied immediately. That ship has been trying to kill you for the past 6 hours. Yes, ma'am, but they're about to die, Danny replied calmly. I can't just watch that happen. Before Karen could respond, Danny had already changed course. The Horizon accelerated toward the alien flagship, its hybrid engines pushing the ship faster than any vessel its size had ever moved. Behind him, 3 other human ships followed without being ordered, their captains making the same impossible choice. The alien crew aboard the flagship watched in shock as human ships approached their dying vessel. Instead of delivering killing blows, the human ships began emergency containment procedures, using their tractor beams to stabilize the failing reactor and their medical transporters to evacuate wounded aliens. Captain Danny Wright worked for 2 hours to save the alien flagship, putting his own ship and crew at risk to rescue beings who had been trying to kill him minutes earlier. When the crisis was finally over, the flagship was safe and over 1,000 alien lives had been saved by human actions. The effect on the alien fleet was immediate and profound. Ship after ship ceased firing and requested permission to communicate. Alien commanders who had never seen mercy shown to enemies during battle found themselves trying to understand what they had just witnessed. HFY's voice came across all communication channels, reaching every ship in both fleets. Admiral Brooks, why did your ship save our people? Karen Brooks looked around her bridge at her crew, all of them humans who had grown up on stories of honor and sacrifice, of helping others even when it cost them everything. Because that's what humans do, Karen replied simply. We fight when we have to, but we don't let people die when we can save them. The silence that followed lasted for nearly a full minute. 300 alien ships hung motionless in space, while their crews tried to process what they had experienced. They had come to contain a dangerous species, expecting to fight savage primitives who would show no mercy and ask for none in return. Instead, they had encountered something that their databases and predictive models had never prepared them for. Humans were indeed dangerous and unpredictable, but they were also capable of breathtaking compassion, sometimes in the same moment as breathtaking violence. Admiral, HFY finally said, we need to talk. Karen looked at the tactical display showing both fleets, human and alien ships, now floating peacefully together, in the space where moments before they had been trying to destroy each other. Yes, Karen agreed. I think we do. The Battle of Saul was over, but Karen Brooks understood that something much larger had just begun. Humanity had proven they could fight, but more importantly, they had proven they could show mercy. That combination was apparently something the galaxy had never seen before, and it was about to change everything. 6 months after the Battle of Saul, Ambassador Helen Davis walked into the great chamber of the Galactic Council for the second time in her life. This time, however, she was not coming as a petitioner asking for mercy. She was coming as humanity's representative to propose a fundamental change in how the galaxy operated. The chamber itself was impressive beyond description, a massive sphere that seemed to float in space with no visible means of support. Thousands of seats arranged in concentric circles could accommodate representatives from every species in the galaxy. Today, all of those seats were filled, and every eye was focused on Helen as she made her way to the center of the room. Helen was now 43 years old, and the events of the past year had changed her in ways she was still discovering. She had negotiated with beings whose thoughts moved differently than any human mind, learned to communicate with species that had no concept of individual identity, and somehow found common ground with creatures that looked like living mathematics. HFY stood to greet her as she reached the center of the chamber. The tall, graceful alien looked the same as always, but Helen had learned to read the subtle changes in the shimmer of his skin that indicated his emotional state. Today, that shimmer showed uncertainty mixed with something that might have been hope. Ambassador Davis, HFY said formally, the Galactic Council recognizes humanity's right to address this assembly. Helen looked around at the thousands of alien faces staring down at her. Some were familiar now, species she had met during the long months of negotiation that had followed the battle. Others were completely unknown, beings from the far edges of the galaxy who rarely participated in council affairs but had come to witness this historic moment. 6 months ago, Helen began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Humanity was given a choice between submission and extinction. We chose a third option. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. The concept of a third option was apparently difficult for many species to understand. We chose to prove that there was a better way, Helen continued, not just for us but for everyone in this galaxy. Director Sam Foster stood up from his seat in the human delegation. He was the head of the Human Integration Project, a new organization created specifically to manage humanity's relationship with galactic civilization. Sam was 51 years old and had spent his career managing complex international development programs on Earth. His experience with bringing different cultures together had proved invaluable in the months following. First contact. The Galactic Council has maintained peace for 12,000 years, Sam said, addressing the assembled delegates directly. But what kind of peace is it when every species lives in fear of stepping outside the boundaries you've drawn for them? Brr. Crystal, being that Helen remembered from their first meeting, spoke in its glass-like voice. The boundaries exist to prevent conflict. Without them, species would expand beyond their limits and war would return to the galaxy. Helen had been expecting this argument. It was the foundation of everything the Council believed about galactic governance. Respectfully, Helen replied, "You're wrong. The boundaries don't prevent conflict, they just prevent growth." She activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy as it existed today, with clear lines marking the territory of each species. It looked organized and peaceful, but Helen had learned to see something else in those neat divisions. "Look at this map," Helen said. "Every species has exactly the space you've assigned to them. No one grows, no one changes, no one discovers anything new. You haven't created peace. You've created stagnation." The wolf-like alien that had spoken at their first meeting growled softly. "Stagnation is preferable to war." "Is it?" asked a new voice from the human delegation. Dr. Lisa Blake stood up from her seat. She was no longer just the science officer from the ESS Defiant. In the months since first contact, she had become the head of the Human-Alien Science Exchange, working with researchers from dozens of species to share knowledge and discoveries. "In the 6 months since we began working together," Lisa said, "human and alien scientists have made more breakthroughs than either group had achieved in the previous century." "Why do you think that is?" The insect-like delegate clicked its mandibles thoughtfully. "Explain." "Because we think differently," Lisa replied. "Humans approach problems from directions that other species never consider, and alien knowledge fills gaps that humans didn't even know existed. When we combine our different ways of thinking, we discover things that none of us could have found alone." Helen watched the faces in the chamber as Lisa spoke. Many of the delegates looked intrigued, while others seemed skeptical or even frightened. "You're proposing chaos," the crystal being said. "We're proposing growth," Helen corrected. "We're proposing that instead of containing every species within artificial boundaries, you allow them to explore, to expand, to discover what they're capable of becoming." Zephi raised one long arm and the chamber fell silent. "Ambassador Davis, what you're describing would require a complete restructuring of galactic civilization. The risks would be enormous." "The risks of staying the same are even greater," Helen replied. "Your system worked for 12,000 years because every species you encountered was willing to accept limitations. But now you've met humans, and we're not going to accept them. You can try to contain us, but we'll keep pushing against every boundary you create." "And if we cannot contain you," asked the wolf-like alien, "then you'll have to decide whether you want us as partners or enemies," Helen said simply. The debate that followed lasted for weeks. Representatives from 47 species argued about fundamental questions that hadn't been discussed in millennia. Should species be allowed to expand beyond their assigned territories? Should technological development be unrestricted? Should the Council's primary role be control or cooperation? Some species were strongly opposed to any changes. They had lived within the Council's system for so long that they couldn't imagine any other way of existing. The idea of unrestricted growth and development terrified them. Other species, particularly some of the younger civilizations, were excited by humanity's proposals. They had always felt constrained by Council restrictions and saw this as an opportunity to break free from limitations that had held them back for centuries. The deciding moment came when Zephi himself stood to address the chamber. "For 12,000 years," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the great sphere, "the Council has maintained peace through control. We have prevented wars by preventing growth. We have maintained stability by maintaining limitations." "Helen, held her breath, waiting to hear whether humanity would find acceptance or face the combined wrath of the galaxy. But, HFY continued, we have also prevented progress. We have stopped conflicts by stopping change. And now we must ask ourselves whether the peace we have created is worth the price we have paid for it. The chamber fell completely silent. Not even the quiet background hum of life support systems could be heard, as thousands of beings waited for HFY to continue. Humanity has shown us something we had forgotten, HFY said. They have shown us that it is possible to be both, fierce and compassionate, both strong and merciful. They fight when they must, but they also save their enemies when they can. Perhaps it is time for the galaxy to remember what it means to grow. The vote that followed was closer than Helen had dared to hope. 24 species voted for humanity's proposal, 22 voted against, and 1 abstained. By a margin of just 2 votes, the Galactic Council agreed to restructure itself from a controlling body to a cooperative one. The changes that followed transformed galactic civilization. Species that had been contained within small territories for millennia began to expand and explore again. Technological development accelerated as different civilizations shared their knowledge freely. New discoveries were made almost daily as beings who had never been allowed to work together began collaborating on projects that spanned multiple star systems. Not everyone was happy with the changes. Some species preferred the old system of guaranteed stability and predictable boundaries. There were conflicts, as humanity had predicted there would be, but they were resolved through negotiation and compromise rather than containment and control. 5 years later, Admiral Karen Brooks stood on the bridge of her flagship, the ESS Unity, and surveyed a galaxy that had been fundamentally transformed. Human ships filled space lanes that had been empty for centuries. Joint research stations pushed the boundaries of known science. Diplomatic missions worked to resolve conflicts that would have been suppressed under the old system. The galaxy was louder now, more chaotic, more alive. It was also more dangerous, as some species pushed their newfound freedom in directions that worried their neighbors. But it was growing again, changing again, becoming something new for the first time in 12,000 years. When humanity had first spoken to the galaxy, they had triggered a transformation that no one could have predicted. The silence that had followed their words hadn't been silence of fear or respect, but silence of anticipation. For the first time in millennia, the future was unwritten, and everyone was eager to see what came next.